So don't stop and think about, oh, is this going to be okay to say? Just say it. My biggest learning after a couple years at Second City is, I don't give a crap what anybody thinks, what I'm going to say or do. I'm going to do what I think it feels right.
Well, Marcy, thanks so much for being here. You're a healthcare expert, marketing expert, but you're also really into improv. And we talked about the healthcare stuff I understand less of, but I get the marketing stuff. But the improv stuff, I love. And I'm super interested in how you've used that as a tool in the business world. Because I think we've all heard about Second City, and people take corporate workshops and things like that, and but I'd love to dig into kind of what your experience has been and how that's worked for you.
I started the improv journey after, I spent 30 years in healthcare marketing, and then 2018 was hit with 3 layoffs in 3 years. And so in part of the job search, I want to give a plug to Job Search Circle and Rosemary Monahan, who runs it. And she highly recommended improv for people in job search, because there's always that one question you get in the interview that you didn't prepare for, and you're like, oh crap, how do I answer this? And so I started the journey for that reason. And I finally, after the pandemic and the masks went away and whatever, I courageously signed up for that Improv 1 at Second City. I'm like, geez, we got the gold standard of improv in our backyard. I'm going to do this. And I really just fell in love with the vibe and the people, and continued on through the improv and stand-up comedy and the audition-only conservatory that moved it into sketch comedy. But there's so many things about improv that help you in life.
Like what?
So the first thing is in the first
See, we
class,
did a little improv right there.
Yeah.
I played off of what she just said.
The first thing that I loved about it is how much it's about teamwork. And you don't think about that because you think, oh, you're going on stage and you're trying to say something funny. No, you don't try to say something funny. You are building on with a team. And one of the first things we learn in the first class is before you go on stage with your team, you all say to each other, I got your back, I got your back, I got your back. And I was like, wow, that's so refreshing. There's a great poster that's a bunch of stuff from Tina Fey that's in Second City I always loved, and it says there's no such thing as mistakes, only opportunities. So in that case, that was just an opportunity to build on that. And the fact that it's really about being part of a team and not about thinking ahead of time, oh, what's that funny thing?
That I'm gonna do? I can't think fast.
But improv is really being in the moment and focusing, and it's important for work, it's important for family life. Yeah. So many times, you get home from work and the kids are so excited to see you, and you're still thinking about work. It's like, oh, I didn't finish that email. I have to get back to, I got to get the kids to bed so I can get back to that email. Right. And you're not in the moment appreciating the time that you have with your children who want to be with you. It's a very short amount of time that your kids want to be with you. So how do you stay in that moment and focus and pay attention to what the other person's saying?
I think you said it, the being present it's weird how hard it is. There's the distractions part, like our phones and our life and business and work and what's, that thing that's on your mind that you can't get off your mind. And having a toddler who's 3 right now is really eye-opening to how you really have to flip a switch to become present. But it also takes some training, going through Second City thing and improv exercises. That kind of retrains your brain, right? I understand.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for it to kick in, but supposedly it retrains your brain. But the other, maybe a little less relevant to business, but one of the things that I learned in improv is to not be trying to think of the next funny thing.
Yeah, totally.
But to be really in the scene and, even in the character that has brought it, it's like, oh, I haven't seen you, my brother, in so long. Okay, now we're sister and brother, and you have to become that brother, right? Yeah, exactly. Right. And so as opposed to thinking of something funny, the funny will come when you build that.
You got to build that rapport. You got to build a relationship.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
There's a point of view that you have to have, otherwise it.
Exactly. And in fact, when I did pitching for the sketches, you have to have a point of view, and where is that coming from? One of the sketches that made it to our final show, the perspective was really about any organization, any business has their acronyms.
Sure.
and then you're out in like a social situation, and you're still using the acronyms because you think it makes you sound smart or something, and people are like, what the heck, right? And so that was kind of the setup, is that we're at like an employee appreciation dinner. We have our spouses, and then the people that work for the company were like, oh, you might have to bleep this out, but oh, the boss was so upset he wanted my ass on his desk by the end of the day, and the husband's like, are you getting harassed at work? Your ass on his, yeah, the asset sales and supply agreement. What are you, and so it kind of went
misinterpreting
on like that. Exactly. So, but it's that whole like having that business experience and then kind of making fun of how we are in business. We all think.
Oh, totally.
But that went on from there. But that's the thing, is that in business they all think that they're that you're so important and that you have all these great things. But once you get out into the real world, you just have to be in the present time, right?
And it's so funny how we spend so much of our time training ourselves to speak the language, to do a certain thing a certain way, and then the second part is untraining all of that, to undo all of that stuff that never, I don't know, I guess it served us at some point somehow. I don't know why, I don't know when it did. Yeah. But I feel like I'm spending a lot of time right now undoing a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, and even, one of my silly philosophies that I said to my kids often is that life is a series of being a freshman, where you don't know where anything is, and you're just like, a deer in the headlights wandering the campus, and then you start to learn your way around, and then, you're a senior, and you're, big man on campus, and you know everything, and then something changes, and you have to start over, like...
Back to being the freshman.
Right. Exactly. You change jobs, or move, or whatever, and it's like, oh, crap, I gotta start all over again, meet people and stuff. So, anyway, that's...
Well, I think, in going back to just, that being present, using sort of those improv skills. I mean, when we're talking to clients, for me, like we have a point of view. We want to share our point of view, but like you and I were just talking earlier about the brief, right? Like it's not about us. It's actually about the person you're trying to communicate to. So like, what do they need to hear or understand? But if you're just waiting your turn to talk in that moment, you're not hearing them, you're not understanding them, and you're not starting with your audience first, right? You're focused on what are you going to say next. And I think that's what's interesting about improv, is it sort of retrains you to think less about what are you going to say next. You're focused on what's happening in this world right now, and how can I add to it, respond to it, or maybe I don't need to add to it or respond to it.
That is a really good point, because I was just thinking, as you were talking, which I shouldn't have been.
I was totally not paying attention and tuning out and thinking of the next smart thing I wanted to say. But yes, continue.
Yes, but do as I say, not as I do. But one of the most powerful things, and of course, I once you get up on stage, I always forget all the things that I'm supposed to be remembering.
Of course, yeah.
Is sometimes the best scenes are started with, or in the middle, or whenever, without words. It could be the way that you
like an action.
An action. We do a lot of training on doing those actions, and you can see that Stephen Colbert was trained at Second City because he's very good at that. Like he'll read something, and then he always folds it up and puts it away in his pocket, because you have to put away whatever you're using. If you're holding a cup, you can't just then start talking with your hands because the cup just dropped. Right?
Oh, right. You gotta absolutely.
Right? But you can start a really powerful scene just by object work.
Yeah.
And do whatever without saying a word. And you could have a minute, which is a long time, or 30 seconds, whatever, go by, and there's no words. There's just that object work. And then somebody will start with a word. But how much more powerful a scene or a meeting, or a creative idea can be if you take those few seconds or minutes of silence, which is really hard for an extrovert like me.
Yeah. You know what's really funny is this morning, we have a team meeting every morning, and usually it's like about 5 minutes of just banter, and then we jump into the week or the day. This morning there was a joke made, and it was something about we're going to take a moment of silence, and we just literally sat in silence for 3 minutes, and people were virtual. It was interesting to see what people would do. Demian was doing a bit the entire time.
The next thing we did was something, was one of my favorites. It's a great warm-up called like 5 Things, where, you give somebody a topic and they have to come up with 5 things immediately. Whatever's off the top of your head, like 5 new breakfast cereals that haven't hit the market.
Granola slammers.
1.
Choo-choo bean bites.
2.
Captain Captain Sogginess.
3,
Blue bean berries.
4,
And Krispy Kreme donuts.
5 things, and then you give the next person. And so the key is like not to be thinking, okay, what would be funny, or what, it's just whatever
Comes to mind. Don't overthink it.
Orange coffee mug flavor. I don't know, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just
And it does taste like it looks, actually.
Yeah.
It tastes exactly like an orange coffee mug. Not a blue one.
No. It's a little stiff. Yeah. So that was really good exercise too, especially if you're trying to bring new ideas and be creative. And I'm sure that you've led and been in a gazillion brainstorming sessions that no ideas.
More like a
idea.
gazillion.
Yeah. See.
Even
gazillion,
I don't know. That's less, I think, actually.
Yeah.
But yes, a few.
Right. So don't stop and think about, is this going to be okay to say? Just say it. And like I said, that was like my biggest learning after a couple years or a year even at Second City is I don't give a crap what anybody thinks of what I'm going to say or do. I'm going to do what I think it feels right. So the same in how do you get out of that in a brainstorming session at work. And okay, I'm just going to say things that come up, and you'll all do the dot exercise afterward and see which one expands out.
Do you think that applies to a performance review?
Yeah.
Say whatever comes to your mind, just blurt it out. How do you really feel? There's a truth to what they're saying.
Right.
And it's so interesting. One thing I do want to talk about is we talked a little bit about the brief. And you've lived this world in healthcare and marketing, and you're marketing to not just the end users of the product, but the distributors of the product. Right. And sort of this idea that companies like ours, creative agencies and others that are out there telling the story can't really be successful without. What's your sort of 2 cents on the brief?
Yeah, it's all about the brief, but you don't want to get caught up in the briefs, right? To me, that is the crux of good creative, starts and ends with the brief, because that sets out the strategy, right? What's your objective here? Who's your target? That's so important. What's their unmet need? What's their pain point that we're trying to solve for? A little bit about what are the competitors.
Like positioning.
Yes, yeah. And so what are they saying?
Because you don't want to sound exactly like them.
Exactly. Hopefully by the time you put together a brief, you've already done some customer journey listening. And It doesn't necessarily have to be elaborate. It can be, some conversations, especially about that customer journey. And when are they most open to the message? What's the message that's going to resonate? Does it change over time with the journey? So for an example about the customer journey, we were doing some targeting of people with diabetes, and with any kind of chronic illness really. But there's different points in their journey where they're open to the message. When they first diagnosed, they might be in denial, and I'm going to try to figure this out on my own, or there might be points throughout the journey if maybe an incident happens where you have some, diabetic, I don't know enough about diabetes, but where okay, I guess I really better do
their
this.
mindset changes depending on where they're at.
Right. And you also have the caregivers or the family members of them that also, especially the wife or the mother, still today tends to be the primary person that buys products. And so making sure that the caregivers are also listened to so that you can understand that part of the journey.
In healthcare, you're saying, you're kind of mapping this out, there's all of these different people that are sort of stakeholders that are different audiences. So a question for thinking about what makes a good brief and what makes a bad brief. In a brief, do you want every single audience person spoken for, or do you want to focus on the one audience at one brief at a time?
Right, one brief at a time. You can add in a little bit, in my opinion, that the end user or this particular communication is going to be targeted toward this user.
Right.
I think my point there is that there's going to be briefs to develop communications to each of those segments.
Each different segment has its own brief because you're going to speak to them in different ways, so you need to be able to brief the team in a different way as well.
Exactly.
So you're not trying to get it watered down in one spot.
So, but you do want to understand. So I mean, it may be that, let's say, again, infant formula. I mean, the motivator is, moms want to be seen as good moms, and they want to give their children the best start to see them grow, right? So that was, an insight. But it might be a consideration in the brief to say they do listen heavily to their healthcare provider. So that might end up being, ask your pediatrician first before whatever, they have in a lot of the pharma commercials. So, I think if there is a consideration for the creative team to just be cognizant of, I think that's important to put in the brief, but it's really the objective, the target, the pain point, and how the product or service is addressing that pain point or filling that unmet need. I mean, those are really, in my opinion, the key things. And as we were talking before, I would often have the senior team, myself included, sign the brief when because often it's iterative. You go back and forth with the agency, with the other stakeholders within the company, and then sign the brief. Are we good on this brief? It's hitting on all the things that are important to us. And then, as we were discussing, when an agency comes back with creative, the question is it on brief or off brief?
Not do I like it or do I not like it?
Not do I like it and do I like it. And again, so many times when you can't nail down senior management to the brief, to the specifics of what is the unmet need we're meeting or what is the benefit or whatever, and then creative will come and they can't even give good feedback. They're like, I'll know it when I see it. I don't like this one. I'll know it when I see it. Well, that just churns agency dollars. Great for agencies. They're making a lot of money every time they do an iteration. But not for the companies. And so if you do that homework up front and have that tight brief, then you're more likely to get, again, if it's on brief, and if the brief met the strategic objectives and it's on brief, then the only person or people or constituents that can tell you whether it's good or bad is your target.
That's the market. When you look at a brief, I've seen briefs that are like 25 pages. I've seen them that are 1 page. What do you think is most helpful and effective? Is it the 1-pager or the 25-pager with all the every possible bit of information?
I think 1, 2 max, because that might be because you make it fancy. Yeah. But what is it, Mark Twain, or I think it's
Mark Twain.
Yeah, that said, I would have made it shorter, but I didn't have time.
Yeah.
Right. And doing that work up front to make it succinct, a brief.
Still it down. It's a brief, right? Isn't that the ironic part of the brief?
Because that I mean, and you manage the creatives. I hired people to do that, but it seems to me that that's too much information to consume for you to then come up with creative ideas. And it's it would seem like overwhelming and almost restrictive or constricting.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Right, to have that much information. So
well, it's information inundation, and in a previous life I worked with Navy SEALs and Delta operators, and at my last company, the Brief Lab, we were training them how to be brief. Mm-hmm. And the ironic part of that world is they actually use briefs differently than creatives do, but they're still briefs. They do briefings all day before they do a mission. The ironic thing is they're not brief. And it's life and death. Like, it's information inundation. And so getting people to distill it down to the most essentials, it can save lives over there, or it can help creative be on target and hit the market. Well, I got to end this with the question I always ask everybody here, which is, what is a word or phrase that we should no longer use in the workplace?
Pivot.
Pivot. Yeah. Pivot, like we're going to change gears to talk about a different thing or a different approach.
Yeah, right. Pivot. Yeah. Well, we need to pivot. It's like, no, let's, I don't know, look for alternative approaches. I don't know that word pivot. It's
Have you heard it a lot?
Yeah, well, and now, I do a lot of work supporting people in job search, and there's been a number of people who, over a long job search, it's like, people tell me I need to pivot. It just makes me vomit every time I hear that word. Maybe it's time to pivot. But, companies also don't want a pivoter.
No.
Companies want to hire someone that's already been doing the same job for the last 20 years, and not someone who was doing a different job and now has pivoted to now start fresh in some other.
That would be like a fun band name. You could be Marcy Freeman and the Pivoters.
And then the Pivoters, yes.
I don't know what kind of music that would be.
It's like Rosie and the Riveters, but
Yeah, oh yeah, and the Pivoters. And it's just, you're always like...
That could be an improv team name.
The Pivoters?
The Pivoters, yeah.
'Cause I think that's in line with what you do in improv a little bit. You pivot a lot, but we won't say that.
Yeah, yes,
We'll just be called that, right?
Yeah. Build on.
All right. Well, let's pivot and not say pivot anymore. How about that?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, deal. Marcy, thanks so much for being here.
Oh, thanks for having me. Hopefully it was fun for you, and hopefully it was helpful for your listeners.
El Fango.